Hello, I'm Craig Constantine.
And I'm Jessica Zou.
Jessica is the host of a podcast called Duct Tape Rocket Ship. And we were discussing, as we do with all of these beforehand, and I think the topic we're going to pick on today is audience, both the question of who listens to our shows, who do we think listens, who do we know listens, and also what does it mean to think about, maybe I'm thinking to think about your audience, and how does thinking about your audience direct what you're or color what we're creating. So that's what I think we're talking about today. Does that sound good to you, Jessica?
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Thank you.
When I first asked you and said, because I do this to everyone, I say, what are the things that jump to mind when I say, let's record a 20-minute podcast? What made you say audience?
Hmm. I Audience is mysterious to me
Hmm.
right now. Um, Even though I know who I created my podcast for, but I'm not sure exactly who my audiences are at this point.
And do you, so duct tape rocket ship is, I'm going to say, made for the people who are directly involved or who maybe you wish were more directly involved in their school systems, in their school district, in their local educational programs. Have you gotten any direct feedback from, like, do you have any data points that say, I have reached my specifically targeted audience?
Hmm. I know that the teachers listen to it
Hmm.
because
Do
I got the
they
feedback. Yeah.
And do they like it, or is it like, because that can go either way. They can be like, we listen to this, like, I wish this would be different, or they can listen to it like, yes, more of this.
Um, it's interesting because one teacher I knew actually shared my episode. I
Hmm.
think that was third episode. He shared it with his community and said, "Give it a listen."
Hmm.
And another teacher told me that, "Hey, I listened to your podcast." Um, yeah, so it's interesting because I didn't really, no parents has told me that they listened to it yet.
Hmm.
But the feedback I got at teachers from teachers.
I'm wondering if it's going to take a while for, like, the first parent to find it, and then, because I'm not a parent of, I don't have kids in a school district, so, but
Mhm.
I'm betting that parents move in cliques, that there's, like, seven parents who all know each other really well, and then there's a completely separate group of seven parents that know each other really well. And I'm thinking the audience is going to sort of like move outwards in ripples. Um, do you create, like, when you create an episode, are you thinking this episode might be better for teacher, like, that you're doing? Do you have, like, this one's for teachers, this one's for parents, or is each one on a topic that you think would apply to both of those audiences?
Yes, I actually thought about it, and I think because all my guests are current parents or
Mhm.
like a recent experienced public school parents, all of them are almost like on the receiving end of the public schools, and so it's almost like a feedback. All my
Hmm.
episodes are kind of like a feedback for the providers of the service.
Hmm. Were you imagining, so that's like a certain direction? Were you imagining that direction when you created the project, or were you hoping to, because you could hope to find an audience and then get them to interact more with the school district, or you could find an audience and hope to change their mind based on what the school district says through your podcast. Like, there's a whole bunch of different directions that you could imagine, anybody could imagine, when they build any podcast show. Did you have a particular directionality like that in mind when you created the show?
Um, Actually, I do. it's actually slightly different from what I just said. The directions that I thought about was creating this. Mm, it's almost like this, like a one maybe opportunity for an individual parent to be heard
Mm.
and then to be understood, and then kind of like I'm hoping to kind of like to create this little motivation. Wow, this is important. I just shared something very important and deep to my heart, deep. I can connect with this person, or I'm talking about something that I believe deep in my heart.
That's
And
important, right?
yeah, important, and I care about my kid or my kids. And how can I make this louder? Or how can I make what I believe to be heard?
Hmm.
And
I
it's
Go ahead.
so it's almost like if every single person in the school community have these feelings, I think collectively there's an opportunity for us to actually really see each other.
Hmm.
Oh, you care about the same thing. I agree, because I care about the same thing too. Because what I find is very hard in the school community is because there's a narrative, there's a narrative that a lot of people have, even me had, like when I first started the public schools, is that I'm not important. My voice is not important. I'm waiting for someone else to make it better for me. And that's all I can hope for
Hmm.
my children's education. When dealing with a big system like a public schools, otherwise you will have to join the PTA to have your voice heard or to feel the importance of your contribution. It's almost a feel like the two ends that where do we fit in as individual. So I feel like the general narrative for the public school parents are, we're just waiting for someone to get it better for us because we're not important, or nobody's gonna hear our voice, or it's not important to hear it. Because what you gonna do?
Hmm.
What can you do? What can you change? And I want to change that.
Have you done anything else? So I'm imagining. I'm like a visual thinker. I'm imagining all the people who would hear one of your episodes, and if that episode is a parent and you're amplifying their voice, then it seems to me like you would want to figure out how to enable the other members of your audience to I don't know what a good word is, to like also, like if I say something on the show, like this is what my issue that I see. And then the other parents want to go, me too. Like, they want to plus one that is the social way of doing it. And on podcasts, it's just like how the technology works, right? Like you and I know this inside out. There's no way really to do that. Or like, yeah, they can go to their favorite podcast app and they can plus one or like or share your show or that episode of your show, but it sounds to me like you're doing something even harder, which is trying to get the other members of the audience, the second, the third, the fourth member of the audience, to somehow put their efforts behind that other audience member. And I'm just wondering, have you thought about that? Like you're trying to get them to maybe rally together, and like, have you thought about that as a challenge that you're facing? And maybe have you tried to do anything in that direction or try and solve that?
Yeah, podcast is just a part of the work I do. So I am a member in our school leadership team, and podcast is actually this is my way of solving um, a, a challenge that I'm facing as a parent representative in the school leadership team.
Hmm.
Traditionally, it's if there is no like the feedback system, for example, parent feedback system established in the local school, you can only rely either on the PTA or rely on your personal network in the
Mm,
school. But from the last year experience, neither of them, I don't believe neither of them can fully represent everyone's voice or most of people's opinions
mm,
or thoughts or experiences that they had. This is especially important for the past year. And I thought about reach out to each individual parent, um, which is can be also challenging because there's hundreds of family, in our school. And also, I thought about what are the ways that um, I can really encouraging parents to be part of something. Because changing the narrative, like I said previously, it's kind of hard
mm.
when we have this narrative, like when we join the public school system. Yeah, so it is a very how am I gonna say this, Craig? This is almost like a part of a piece of a puzzle
Right, right.
that I can see and I wanted to put together because there are more stories or more understanding or more um, narratives
Mm.
that I do share on my website.
That's what I was going to say is where else can the audience members, like the people listening to your particular show and its episodes, where else can that audience engage? Are you trying to get them to engage with you, or are you trying to have them create their, engage as their own community? And oh, by the way, Jessica is also here. Like, there's different ways you could try and structure that, and different
Yeah,
platforms you could try to build that on. I'm just
yeah,
wondering what else have you built in parallel to the duct tape rocket ship, which I love I love the image of the mental image and the actual image of a rocket ship made out of duct tape is awesome. But sorry, what else have you built to go with your podcast?
yeah. So that's exploration. I'm trying to figure it out. I think that the local school community, um, maybe the first step is to raise the question: where can all of us find like-minded people in our local school community? And if you are able to find someone that believes the same thing or enjoy listening to this, and if it's possible to get together and to talk about this and then to say, hey, you know we are not a PTA member and we're in the public schools, what can we do to come together and then to have our voice heard?
Hmm.
So yeah, so that's part of the things that I am exploring, and I'm really hoping to create some examples in my local school and then figure out, like what are the piece that's needed to completely build something.
Hmm. And you mentioned earlier that you've got a couple, two, maybe three specific educators, in the school district who have heard the show and thought that it was worth sharing, which is about the highest compliment that podcasters get is when somebody actually says, "Yo, listen to this." That's about as good as it gets. Um, have you heard anything like from the administration? Like sometimes I hear about like bureaucratic layers where the teachers they all like X, but the bureaucracy and the school board is all like, no, not X, we're doing Y. And I'm thinking that it almost could wind up with three different fiefdoms here. You have the parents, and then you have the administrators, and then separately you have the educators. Have you gotten any feel for, is the administration noticing and or engaging or feeding you any information about the project?
Mm. I know that our school district know about my show. I know that.
Is that good or is that bad?
Um, Given what's happened in our school district last year, the superintendent um, resigned her position before the term was before the full term.
Right.
So yeah, given that, um, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing
Hmm.
for the school district to know that there are parents' voice out there, because our school district actually went has gone through a couple of lawsuits in the past year about sorry, not about, but a lawsuit against the school district on racism, on racism.
Hmm.
So it was, yeah, it was big news for Seattle. It's a
Right.
Seattle public school. So
Yeah, and the school district would only have so many, resources. There's only a certain number of people in the administration. They can only do so many things, and their, primary job is to run the school. So, you can't. I wouldn't expect them to, suddenly get all excited and want to turn the whole ship, turn left because this is cool.
yeah.
But I'm wondering if you see opportunities where the administration or the teachers are doing something that you'd want to shine a light on, so you can use your podcast to shine a light or to give a platform to teach. Sorry, I misspoke. To parents, but you can also say, like, just for example, hey guys, everybody listening, the school district has this online community board system and our kids are all using it, but why don't we use it too? So have you considered using the podcast to shine a light on the things in the administration that you wish they would do more of?
Mm, that's probably going to be in a different season
Hmm.
that I would consider, because, like anyone would, anyone focusing on education, it is, it is a the reason that it's just getting so big and then it's hard to change anything is challenging to change anything is because it's such a complicated system,
Hmm.
and that there are so many things that you can talk about and focus on. Mm, so I wanted to focus on one thing and not necessarily um, how should I describe this? I wanted to focus on one thing and get get it to a deeper level, rather than focusing on m- multiple things at the same time.
Hmm. That's a good point. I probably make the opposing mistake too often. Um, and I'm just watching the time. So we've been really talking about a specific audience, like the audience for Jessica's show.
Mm-hmm.
And part of what I'm thinking the whole time is like, your audience is nothing like the audiences that I think are listening to my shows. And I'm wondering, like, oh, can you and I find is there some lesson that we can take from what we've been talking about? Like it looks to me like we know exactly who your audience is supposed to be. We may not know which of the parents, but it's probably 10 out of these 4,000 parents. But is there anything that we can take away to think about audiences in general, about like how to engage them?
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. The way that you ask it.
I'm notorious. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, no, no apologize. I mean it. I mean it's interesting because I think a audience is generally tied to the goal of our podcast. So so I'm using my own podcast as example. Mm, yeah, so engaging with the audience, um, the guests that I invite are the parents. But interestingly, I'm really hoping the audience are different group of people. I'm really wishing,
Mm,
like my podcasts are having some special. Um, my guests all have a special angles and insight about their experiences, and which is may not be a lot of experiences of the audiences that in the public schools, that I really hope that other audiences can hear that,
mhm.
and then to feel like I'm special too. So when I reach out to my to my potential guests, more potential guests in the school district, I'm hoping that it's encouragement, almost like, oh, I see somebody did this, and I think I can do this too.
Hmm.
In a way, I don't know if that answers your
Yeah, and
question.
well, I don't think the question I asked has a definite answer, but I like everything that we've been saying here. Um, a podcast and its audience is a very much a chicken and egg question. Like you could just make a podcast and ignore who it's supposed to be for. I mean, it's probably wise if you think about what am I doing, what am I creating, why am I creating it. But you don't have to. You could ignore audience entirely and just record.
Hmm.
And that's more of what I'm doing with many of the things that I'm doing. This show is actually I know exactly who it's for. I could name names, right? But what you're doing is very much the other way. You are specifically, I mean, you don't know everybody in the school district, but you probably know a lot of the people. Like you could point to them in the supermarket and you're
Hmm.
saying, I'm trying to create this thing. I'm trying to provide this service. I'm trying to highlight those people right there. And I think that's a very, I want to say unusual, but I don't mean it in a bad way. Like unusual, like, wow, that's even harder than what I'm doing. That's an unusual way to do it, to have a specific, you actually know who these people really are. And it sounds to me like it's making it easier for you to figure out who should you talk to and what should be in this episode. It doesn't necessarily make podcasting any easier. Like getting people to listen is still hard, but in some ways it sounds like that makes that a little easier.
Yes, it does.
Cool.
Yeah. I
All right. Well, any last thoughts before I hit stop? I mean, I could talk forever if we could talk about things forever, but I think that's a good place.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for all these amazing questions.
I just go, I don't know. Why don't I ask Jessica? That's all I do. I just ask people, I don't know. But no, it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Had a lot of great conversations previously and glad to have had this one. So thanks for taking the time today, Jessica.
Thank you, Craig. That was fun.